Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be doing some vintage style kitchen spring thrift flips. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this bread bin that I thrifted for just $2. I gave it a really good clean and then I used Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white to give it 2 coats. So this is going to make sure that my paint sticks well, but it's also going to block any stains. This has obviously been in a kitchen, so just in case there's any oils or anything that I wasn't able to clean off, this is going to block those from coming through my paint finish. So I'm going to do 1 coat, let it dry for about an hour, then I'll come in with a second coat and give it a couple of hours to dry after that. Now I was careful not to have a buildup of paint in the runner area where the bread bin door opens and closes. Later, I took out Paint Couture's Pacific Pearl chalk paint. I ended up doing 2 coats of this. The primer definitely saved me some coats, and I ended up painting the entire piece in that. And as this is a chalk paint, I will be sealing it a little bit later. Now, as I said, I was very careful, especially on the door of the bread bin, to make sure I didn't get too much paint buildup, because obviously I still want this to be able to be used and for that door to be able to open and close. When my paint was dry, I used Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin to seal my entire project. I ended up doing 2 coats for this so that whoever ends up getting this one will be able to wipe it down, dust it off. I end up adding decoupage paper to the front of this, so I probably didn't need to do this sealing step, but at that point I wasn't 100% sure where I was going with this. I then took out half of Roycycled's flour sack blocks, so there's also a blue design for this one as well. We're using the brown one. I'm just working out here how much I'm going to be able to fit on the top section of the bread bin, and I'm going to trim that off. I do want to be able to see that sweet crown on top, and then I'm going to crease it on the sides as well to work out how much I'm going to have to cut off from that section. And I'm just using my fingernails to crease it, and then I'm going to use my scissors to trim that to size. Before I trim the other section, I took out Paint Couture's Decoupage Medium in matte. I'm going to lay down a generous coat on the top section where I want that crown piece to go. And I'm just making sure that I'm getting it where I want the paper to go. And then I'm going to grab that paper and press it into the decoupage medium. I do sometimes also like to use my mister to dampen the paper, just like I did there. It just helps the paper to relax and you do tend to get less wrinkles. Here I'm just using a ball of cling wrap to smooth out those creases and wrinkles and to push that decoupage paper just underneath the lip a little bit. And I'll deal with the overhang paper at the back when that's dry. Next, I'm going to work out how much of the paper I'm going to be able to fit on the door of the bread bin. I was definitely brave doing this as I was tackling this project. I was wondering if it was going to work out, but you don't know unless you try. So as you can see on the sides there, I'm actually folding the paper over so that I can work out how much I'm going to need. I found that this was a lot easier than trying to crease it. And I'm also working out how much I'm going to be cutting off the bottom. I do want this design to be along the whole front of the bread box, and then I'm going to trim off the excess from the sides and on the bottom. Once I finished trimming the decoupage paper, I applied a generous coat of my decoupage medium in matte to the front door of the bread box there. Now, something I definitely had to keep in mind was to make sure I had product in the sections, in the gaps between the different little panels of the bread box door there. I had to make sure that there was some there so that the decoupage paper could stick to it. But I was also trying not to get much of that product, if any, near the sections where the door actually opens and closes on the runners. I've already misted my paper so that it's a little bit more flexible, and I'm just going to start positioning positioning it. Now you'll notice that I am going to be, once I've got this in position properly, I'm actually going to be holding that paper up and working in sections so that I can press that paper into those gaps. So here you can see I'm using a ball of cling wrap, very gently pressing that into the gaps or the slats on the door, and I'm lifting that paper up until I have each of those different sections down. And I have misted my paper, as I said, so I'm being very gentle, but this is also allowing the paper to be more flexible. So I'm just going to continue to work one slat at a time, and I do use a little bit more water here and there. I'm going to keep going until I get to the handle of the bread bin section. Once I got to the handle section, I used my craft knife to make some cuts on the side where it was the end of the little handle. I just want to cut that, and I also cut underneath so that I could have that paper go either side of the handle there. As I said, I want this design to continue, so I'm going to add some product down the bottom as well and work one section at a time until I have the decoupage paper down. I noticed that there was a gap under the handle, so I decided to go in with my nails, and also I end up using a craft knife as well to actually cut where the door meets the bottom of the bread bin, and I'm going to reposition that paper so that there is not that gap, and I'm actually going to end up folding that paper over the little lip that goes inside the bread bin. So this is going to allow the ticking stripe pattern to continue, so it's not going to sort of interrupt the eye as you're looking at it. But it's going to fill in that gap that was left from the decoupage paper going on the handle. I'm adding a little bit more product underneath that, and then I'm going to go over the top of that with the decoupage medium as well. I am being careful not to get any product on the bit that is overhanging. I need that to go on the inside of the bread box. Here you can see that I am applying another coat of decoupage medium over the top of my paper. So this is going to seal everything in. And again, I was very careful not to have too much product build up on the edges. Now, I did have some extra paper that was on the right-hand side. So I am going to have to wait until my decoupage medium dries, and then I will be going in with a craft knife to trim off that excess. Once the decoupage medium was dry, I used my craft knife and went in at an angle to trim off that excess paper, and then I just tore the little bits of paper away one section at a time. Next, I added some decoupage medium to the little lip inside the bread box and also to the back part of the decoupage paper, and I'm going to gently bend that decoupage paper over the top. I know we've got a little bit of a gap, but I still think it looks quite tidy, and then I'm going to go over the top of that as well and trim off the excess paper. I'm also going to trim off the excess from the top part of the bread bin as well. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Antiquing Glaze. I'm actually going to use that to help hide some of the little tears that we had when I was actually opening and closing the door. The very bottom slat that has the handle on it sort of separated away the paper, but this decoupage medium is really tying in with the already aged look of the paper, so I'm just adding that, and then I'm using a wet wipe to pull back some of that excess. The decoupage medium does act as a sealer, so I am able to wipe back as much or as little as I want. I'm going to continue to go around and add that glaze in a few different sections, giving the piece a look of age, but also disguising some of the small tears or gaps in the paper. Once I finished adding some of that glaze to the front, I then also went in and started adding it to the rest of the sections that have the white paint. I do want this to have a vintage look, so I'm just sort of dabbing at that glaze. And I'm also going to be repeating the same process on the sides of the bread bin as well. I don't want this to look brand new. I think it would look odd given the style of decoupage paper that I'm using. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to just be going along the edges of the bread box there with this. I wanted to bring in another color. I thought this tied in really nicely with the feel of the paper. We've got that crown, so the bronze just felt like it tied in really nicely. And I'm going to also be going on the inside of the edge of the bread box as well. I only ended up doing 2 coats. I don't need it to be perfect, and my paint is sealed, so I am able to go along, as you may have seen there, with my finger to tidy up any of the edges. And I also at times used a wet wipe if I needed it, because I don't want the gold to go all the way onto the side of the bread box. Once my 2 coats of bronze were dry, I used a small brush and offloaded Pacific Pearl onto a paper towel, and I'm just doing some dry brushing over the top of the bronze. This is going to tone down that metallic and give it a bit more of an aged, worn look. It also really softens the look as well and ties in all the different sections of this project. And here's a look at our finished bread box. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It was definitely a challenge to decoupage such an unusual shape, but it was definitely worth it. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. My next project was inspired by this beautiful willow rose sifter. It's a vintage piece that I found that I am going to be having in my own kitchen, but I wanted to see if I could recreate this look with something new, well, something that I thrifted that's just sort of a more mass-produced piece. So I only paid $2 for this, so I thought it was definitely worth a go. So I'm going to give it a good clean, and then I took out Paint Couture's Pine Cone Chalk Paint. I'm going to pour some of that out into a container, and then I'm going to add some of Paint Couture's Pitch Black chalk paint. And I really just did this by eye based on what color I wanted to achieve. I ended up going a little bit darker than the brown rust that was on our inspiration piece, but I'm going to then add some Saltwash texture additive. This is going to thicken up the paint because I am trying to create the look of rust without having to use any sort of patina products. I want to show you that you can definitely do that just by using paint and texture additive. So I'm then going to go in and I'm going to use a chip brush for most of this project, and I'm going to dab and stipple that Saltwash paint mixture onto my surface. Now, the salt wash sticks really well, so I wasn't worried about having to prime this, plus I didn't want to have some white primer peeking out underneath. And I'm going to dab and stipple that on because I find that it can emulate the look of rust. So using that chip brush definitely helps as well to create that texture. I ended up doing 1.5 coats. My second coat really was only a touch-up coat where I went in and fixed up any areas where I had missed certain sections. And I'm just going to continue to work my way around. I did end up going into the sieve there, but I didn't go on the bottom section of it. I figured I was going to probably use this like a pot planter, so I didn't really need to do anything about the bottom section. And I did give this a fair amount of time to dry as well. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Italian Ivory mineral paint. I'm going to be doing 2 coats on the center section. Just like our inspiration piece, I want to have that nice vintage style cream tone in the center with the more rustic edges and the inside. I allowed my brush to skip over certain areas to allow that salt wash mixture to peek through to make it look like, as we said before, like it was rusting up in certain areas. And I do end up going back in after my 2 coats of Italian Ivory and touching up some of the border sections, just to make sure that it definitely was looking rusty and that I hadn't sort of had any errors by getting that paint where I didn't want it. When that was dry, I took out IOD's Catarina transfer. I thought this was absolutely perfect. It's got those stunning vintage roses in there, and they were a really good scale for my project. So I'm just flipping through, working out which designs were going to be suitable, and I settled on this beautiful one here. We've got a couple of roses, we've got some beautiful dark green leaves and some rose buds. So I'm going to then go in and peel the backing off that, and we're going to start adding that to my sieve. So I'm going to press that down, just sort of bend it around, and then I'm going to use the transfer stick that comes with your transfers to start rubbing that transfer down. The transfers do have a little bit of stick to them, so this is what's helping my transfer to stay attached to the surface. And then I'm going to lift up the edge of the transfer and start rubbing. The Italian Ivory mineral paint that I have in the center there has a built-in top coat, so I found that the transfer came off really easily. I then used the carrier sheet and went in and did some further burnishing, and then I took out Paint Couture's Extreme Garden Satin and I used that to seal over the top of our transfers. Is going to protect them, and I also ended up going over the top of the sections where I had that Saltwash mixture that was done with a chalk paint, so I just want to make sure that I have that sealed well. It is going to probably be going in a kitchen. And here's a look at our vintage style rose sifter. I think this turned out really sweet and not too bad for a brand new sifter with some paint and an IOD transfer. But let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project today, I'm going to be using this little mini wooden cutting board or serving board, and I'm going to begin by first using Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze to stain my project. So the glazes can act as a semi-gel stain, and I really love how it warms up the wood and it also adds to that aged look. Now this is obviously a handmade piece that someone has done. I only paid $1 for it, but I definitely wanted to give it some character, some age, so applying this glaze is definitely going to help. I'm going to use a wet wipe to help spread that glaze, and then I'm also going to add it around the edges as well. When the glaze was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Abundance Mineral Paint. I'm going to go in and start painting it on, but I want this to look like a piece that has been sanded and worn. So I am doing a very messy, rough coat, allowing my brush to skip over certain areas. This was inspired by some beautiful boards that I saw on Pinterest, and I really wanted to replicate that look without having to get out my sander. I only did one coat, I let it dry completely, and then I took out my Rose Botanical transfer by IOD. I just wanted this text here, so I'm going to trim that out and put it to one side, and then I took out the Catarina transfer again, and I'm going to be using this beautiful pink rose with the Rose Botanical text. So I'm then going to peel the backing off the rose first. I want this one to be in the background and the text to go over the top. I'm going to position it in the center with some of those lovely rose buds creeping up the handle of our serving board, and then I'm going to start rubbing and burnishing that down. Remember, the Abundance Mineral Paint has a built-in top coat, so again, I did not have any trouble getting these transfers to adhere. I'm just going to continue to rub that, lift that plastic up as I'm going until I have the entire image down. Once I have the image transferred, I then use the carrier sheet to do some further burnishing. This just makes sure that everything is down and sticking well. I then removed the backing of the Rose Botanical text, and I'm going to layer that over the top of the Catarina rose. You definitely want to go a little bit slower when you are working with transfer text. They are thinner designs, so I just gently lifted up that plastic, making sure each time that those thin letters had transferred down. If you miss any areas, you can just go back, reposition it, and continue rubbing. To seal my transfers, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. I'm going to be doing 2 coats, and I'm also going to seal around the edges of my project as well, just to make sure that I have the entire piece sealed really well. I wanted to add one more element, so when that was dry I took out some twine and I'm going to start wrapping that around the handle. I thought that this would be a nice touch to bring in the sort of more natural element of the twine, bring in another tone, but also this doesn't have a hole in the top, so if somebody wanted to hang it, it would be a little bit tricky. So by adding this twine and tying it on well, there's going to be something that you can hang from a hook basically. So I'm also going to sort of change the direction that I'm winding that twine around, and then when I'm happy with that, I'm going to tie a knot on the back. I did then decide that I wanted to just add a little bit more twine on the front, so I'm just going to wrap that around a couple of times and then tie a bow. I do really love to add twine bows when I can on projects. I think it just looks really sweet. And here's a look at our rose serving board. I love how this turned out. I really love the combination of that Abundance mineral paint with the Catarina transfer. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can upcycle kitchen decor using decoupage and transfers. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find some of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.